Katniss didn't know how long they waited in the cave as she nervously watched over Rue and Peter. She had heard a lot of cannons till it went silent. She had been counting the cannons and knew that there had to be at least a handful of tributes left if she was right. Rue had been getting paler, and the fever she had suddenly gotten seemed to be getting only worse, and Katniss was worried that she would lose her so close to the end. Katniss was getting nervous. She knew it was time to leave the cave sooner or later, and just as she debated it with herself, an announcement came. There are now 10 remaining tributes. May the odds be ever in your favor. With the announcement, Katniss knew it was now or never, especially when she could hear what sounded like animals roaring in the distance. She had heard about some of the monstrosities that were in the games and knew she didn't want to be cornered. We have to go now, Katniss said, rousing the two from their uneasy rest. Rue weakly opened her eyes as Peter got up to his feet, leaning against the wall of the cave. Katniss scooped up Rue into her arms into a bridal carry as gently as she could, but even so, the girl let out pained, muffled screams that were somehow lacking in volume and knew she was getting too close for comfort. We have to move fast. I think something is in the woods. Katniss held Rue tighter and moved towards Peter, throwing his arm over her shoulder as they began their perilous trek outside of the safety of their cave. Katniss was already tired, not having slept and her body still burning from the day before, but she pushed on regardless. Hold on tight, she said to Peeta as they started moving as fast as they could through the forest. Peeta was hobbling next to her as she did her best not to jostle Rue in her arms. They heard the first of many roars in the distance before they heard inhuman screaming, then cannon fire as another tribute was claimed. Katniss decided to up the pace even if she got more pained gasps from Rue and Peeta as she dragged them along as fast as her feet could carry her. The audience at home were watching nervously as the beast were closing in on other tributes, nervously waiting to see if they caught up to Katniss. Cannons started going off in quick succession, each accompanied by a chorus of screams before they were quickly silenced. Katniss did her best to pay them no mind because she knew getting distracted would easily mean she was next. The audience at home were cheering as loudly as they could. You can make it, Katniss. Get Rue and Peter out of there. They're coming for you fast. Katniss just continued to move till she felt a gasp from Rue and her tightening her grip on what remained of Katniss's clothes. Katniss looked down at Rue, making sure to keep moving and avoid running into anything, and she could only see the girl looking petrified. She followed Rue's gaze, glancing up at the banner of the tributes that had been thrown up after a particularly long and agonizing scream that had lasted far too long for her liking, as if whatever was hunting them had tortured whoever had become its latest prey. She saw the picture of the boy that Rue had called her brother and could feel the wrenching sobs that were mixed with pain coming from Rue. She looked down at Rue with a hand thrown over her mouth, trying to muffle her cries, and did her best to utter reassurances at the girl while they ran. I'm so sorry, Rue. We're going to be okay. I promise we are going to be okay. Katniss knew that she was saying those words to Rue and Peter as much as she was saying them to herself so that she could believe it. She had to believe they could make it. She was heading in the direction of the start of the games, so she could get up on the structure that held all of their supplies at the beginning to get some high ground away from the monsters. They burst through the clearing, only stopping for a moment to check their surroundings, and on the opposite side of the clearing, they caught their first sight of the monsters that seemed to stop and watch them before charging. Katniss dragged Peeta carrying Rue over to the large structure as she quickly tried to find her way up. The monsters she had caught sight of were shrouded in darkness with yellow eyes hovering in the shadows of the night for only a moment before they charged with their seemingly mangled bodies. Katniss set Rue down for a moment and quickly did her best to help Peeta up, and she could see the monsters closing in the distance. Peeta scrambled up as she quickly picked up Rue and pushed her up. "Grab her!" she shouted at Peeta, and it was only for a moment, but she saw the hesitation on his face that cut her deeply. But this was not the time for this. "Now!" She shouted, and he seemed to regain his bearings as he pulled up Rue as fast as he could, causing pain to the both of them, but quickly rushing over to help Katniss up onto the platform. She got up just in time as she heard the beast crashing into the side of the platform under her footing. The girl on fire saw Peter sitting next to her as he tried to catch his breath, but she quickly shot up. Where was Rue? She saw Rue lying motionlessly with her wounds seemingly opened in front of her and quickly scrambled towards the girl, quickly searching for a pulse. She waited anxiously as she listened till she felt it, weak but still there. Throw her off. She heard a loud voice behind her as she quickly went in front of Rue to shield her and pulled back her bow and arrow ready to fire. Cato stood grinning with Peeta in a headlock as he used him as a shield every time Katniss tried to get a clear shot. Rue was watching, her eyes barely able to open. They were so close to the end, and, of course, something had to happen. I'm surprised you're still alive. I would have thought Loverboy here would have stabbed you in the back himself, Cato said with a laugh. His face was bloodied, and Katniss could see what had to be battle wounds. Whether by a person or beast was the actual question. Looky here, girl on fire. Why don't you take the shot? Cato smiled menacingly, waving Peeta in front of him wherever Katniss was thinking of aiming. I'm going to kill you, Katniss said with barely contained rage as she watched him hold Peeta cackling wildly. She could see he had already lost it. You can, but I would have snapped your little boyfriend's neck by the time you kill me. And who knows? You could miss. Katniss hated to admit it, but he was right in some aspects. If she shot now, the chances of her killing Peeta were too high, and she didn't think she could live with herself if she did. The audience and Game Master were watching the action anxiously. The beasts hadn't been called back as they thought it created an atmosphere of heightened tension. Katniss knew that if she failed, Cato would kill not only Peeta and her, but Rue, and that thought alone spurred her on, not to lose her aim and focus. She saw Peeta signaling towards Cato's hand and knew what he wanted to do. It was a risky shot. If she was off but an inch, she could easily shoot Peeta in the throat and kill him. Not to forget, Cato would come barreling at her as she tried to arm herself. Hand to hand, she stood no chance. With no other options and readying herself for any form of counter, she took the shot. It was as if time slowed down in those moments as the arrow left her bow. All of her hopes were riding on this. All of the group's hopes were riding on her making the shot, and the pressure was not something that made it easier. She couldn't breathe till the shot connected, going through Cato's hand, causing him to let go of Peeta, who quickly turned around and gave him a hard shove off the side of the platform. Cato fell to the beasts that proceeded to start tearing into him, not even going for the kill, but ripping pieces and mauling him as if to entertain themselves. He was screaming out, trying to reach out among the pile of mauling beasts, looking at Katniss as she could only stare in terror. She looked at him crying in the pile of bodies till he uttered a few words. Please, please kill me. She raised her bow, and Peeta went to stop her, but she just sent a glare at him, and he dropped his hand. Katniss raised her bow and took aim, and she could see Cato mouthing "thank you" at her. She fired the bow, and it landed right between Cato's eyes. He went silent. Cato, dying, somehow left the beasts uninterested. Katniss was just shocked at that. The beasts left, and she knew they were most likely called back. Katniss did a quick check on Peeta before rushing back to Rue. She was still alive, thankfully, and Katniss quickly checked over her wound. They needed to go now. She looked around. The games should have been over. There are now 3 tributes remaining. That sent a chill up her spine as she knew what the game was trying to get them to do, and she felt her heart break more when she saw Rue finally open her eyes with a weak smile. Looks like it's time for you to go, Katniss, she said, and Katniss was just shaking her head no, with tears threatening to spill. No, Rue! We are almost there. We can make it. Just hold on. Rue looked past Katniss to Peeta, who was looking at her, with a look she couldn't discern but could guess. He wanted her gone. That much she knew. She had seen him when he had been with Cato's group chasing after tributes, and she wanted to go herself. But not for him. For Katniss, because all that mattered to her now was she made it. Rue slowly raised her hand to caress Katniss's face, and she could see the wall Katniss was holding up slowly, crumbling before silent tears started falling. "It's time for you to go, Katniss." But the girl on fire just shook her head no. "You will make it," Katniss said with a determined look that scared Rue. "Katniss?" she asked nervously. Katniss reached into her pocket for something, and Rue's eyes widened as she saw the poisonous berries that she and Katniss had seen when they had been collecting food. "Katniss, what are you doing?" Rue asked nervously as her mind was already connecting the dots. "Please don't," she said with a small cry, but Katniss seemed unmoving as she stood up to face Peeta, who looked bewildered. "Katniss, what's going on?" he asked, seeing the look on her face. "Sir, the audience is requesting we end the game with the 3 of them still alive because it looks like they might all die." The game's master looked perplexed. "That can't be. Wait until we see what Peeta does. I don't think he is willing to die for the girl." But as they turned back to their screens, the scene only seemed to get worse. Peeta had initially refused to kill himself, with Katniss knocking away some of the berries that were in her hand, especially for a kid he didn't know. Katniss had stepped back and immediately drew her bow because she knew one thing. If she did kill herself, Peeta would only have a weakened Rue stopping him from victory, and as much as she thought of Peeta, after all he had done in the games, she knew he would probably do it. "I have no problem taking you out before ending myself." Peeta was shocked and wanted to say something, but the glare Katniss was giving him was as if asking him to argue differently. "Peeta, we don't kill kids," she said, watching his every move ready to fire because she didn't know if he would try to charge at her. "Then I will too," a voice said from Katniss's side, and she knew who it came from. Katniss glanced out of the bottom of the corner of her eye at Rue. She felt a chill up her spine as she saw Rue holding some of the berries in her grasp, looking at Katniss. "If you go, I go," she said, her eyes never leaving Katniss. "What are you doing, Rue? You just need to hold on and you will make it." Everyone was on edge, eyes looking around nervously with their audience tense at their homes. They all glanced at the berries in their hands, and Katniss gave a look around. She glanced at Peeta, and he seemed to give her a sort of signal looking at the berries. She thought he was about to suggest Rue take them, but she could see what he meant with his eyes. "Then let's all take them," Katniss said. The audience and the control room took a collective gasp as they didn't know what to do. Comments on the broadcast were all losing their minds, and President Snow watched closely. The trio raised the berries to their mouths, ready to take a bite. "Stop!"